Rich butter, Okay, so hello everyone, welcome to another episode, the 40th episode of Satna Talks of Music. This is a very different setup with Itachi sitting live here right with me. So welcome everyone, and before we begin, can everyone give me a quick thumbs up if our voice is audible? Okay, we have the thumbs up and the hearts. So let's begin the event. So everyone here knows that Ibn Muhammad Khan Sahab sitting here with me. He is the last Khalifa of the Lucknow Shahjahanpur Gharana, and now who am I really to talk of his achievements or contributions in the Indian classical music world. So welcome Visachi.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And thanks to the viewers, my adab, and good evening, best wishes.
So, Sachi, we would initially like to know about the initiation of the Lucknow Shahjahanpur Gharana and its contributions in the development of Sarod as an instrument.
You see, my ancestors, they came from Afghanistan. There were two cousins, and one of them was trading in horses, and another one was having a commission in the cavalry. And they settled in areas where where the Pathans held sway. The Pathans were in majority; they were ruling there. They had the power in those cities or towns. So one of them settled in a small kasbah called Bagrasi, which was in the Bulandshahr district, and another ancestor of mine, he settled in Shahjahanpur. So when they came, they used to play rabab, and they used to play martial music just to encourage the soldiers to boost up their morale, to fight more, to be more brave, and so on and so forth. As it happened in the old days, there were martial musicians, there were bands and things like that. So they were playing martial music, one of the, and so when they came to India, my ancestor Niamatullah Khan, he wanted to learn Indian classical music. So he went to Basat Khan Sahab, who was a direct descendant from the son's side, to teach him Indian classical music. And he said, I play rabab and I want to learn Indian classical music on rabab. He said, look, rabab is not suited for Indian classical music because it has only 1.5 octaves, so it has its limitations. So you learn something else. You learn the instruments which were prevalent at that time. So if you learn sitar or veena or whatever. But this man was adamant, and he said, no, I play rabab and my hands move in a certain way. I'm used to that, so I want to learn. So he was a genius. So he thought about it, and then with the help of Basat Khan Sahab, he changed the rabab and came up with this instrument which we call sarod. So he changed the wooden fret boat, finger boat, to a iron one, because there was no steel in those days, and put on brass strings and iron strings, and did away with the frets. The rabab has frets also, tight frets, not the frets like sitar or subahar, but it was tight. In the old days it was guts, nowadays they use nylon. So he did away with that, and then he went back to Basat Khan Sahab and said, look, now I have this instrument and I can play it like a rabab, and now it has all the 3 octaves, so you teach me. So the Basat Khan Sahab was very pleased, and he started teaching him. And And then this sarod developed in the family. There were a lot of changes later on. Other people also contributed, added more things, changed the shape, but that was much later. And then the other gentleman who held the commission in the cavalry, he became a disciple of Umrao Khan Sahib, who was a direct descendant of Mia Tansen from the girl's side, the daughter's side. And since he had settled in Shahjahanpur, that branch of the family later on got known as Shahjahanpur Gharana, and the one which was in Bagrasi, initially it was known as Bulandshahr Gharana, but later on when Ni'matullah Khan Sahib became the ustad and the court musician of Wajid Ali Shah, the last Nawab of Lucknow, and he shifted to Lucknow, that Gharana came to be known as Lucknow Gharana. And through intermarriages between the cousins, the two Gharanas merged, and now it is known as Lucknow Shahjahanpur Gharana.
Right. So what were the characteristics of the compositions in the early days?
You see, earlier the compositions which were taught by the seniors, there are records available. There's one record available of one of Ni'matullah Khan Sahib's son, Asadullah Khan, popularly known as Kokab Khan Sahib. So his record is there, and in which he has played a Bhairavi Gat and one or two other Gats which are attributed to Basat Khan Sahib. So initially they were playing the compositions which are composed by Basat Khan Sahib and other seniors also. Later on, the family members, the elders of my family, they also composed a lot of, not all of them were composers, but some of them were very prolific composers, and they have composed a lot of Gats.
Okay. So over the centuries, what were the changes which came? If you could elaborate on that.
Changes in the instrument or in
the compositions?
Compositions have not changed.
Okay.
Compositions have not changed. You see, the Bulandshahr Gharana compositions, they were short. They were, most of them in one cycle, in one avartan. And since they were Rabab players, so their compositions were shorter. And in Shahjahanpur, since the Shahjahanpur Gharanas Ustad Umrao Khan Sahib was a Beenkar, so his compositions were longer, sometimes 2 avartans or 3 avartans. And later on, my uncle Ilyas Khan Sahib and my guru also, he became disciple of Yusuf Ali Khan Sahib, Ustad Yusuf Ali Khan, who learned from Abdul Ghani Khan Sahib, who belonged to the Kalpi Gharana, Dhurpat Gharana of Kalpi. And so their compositions were also longer. So these 2 or 3 avartans of compositions, they are called Kulfidar Gats.
Okay, so how does the present instrument differ from the one which was created initially?
Initially it was more or less, it looked like a rabab, but with the modifications which were brought on by Ni'matullah Khan Sahib. And the drum also was sort of an oval shape, like a rabab. And later on, much later, Alauddin Khan Sahib made certain changes. The drum became rounder, and he added more pegs, the main strings, and also into sympathetic strings. The height of the sarod became low, because earlier the height was quite high. The pate, as we call it, it was very deep. So that also changed. And then the other people also, other gharanas also changed, modified a little bit here and there. But basically the basic structure has remained the same.
Awesome. So gharanas like the Lucknow, Banaras, Jaipur, along with music, had seen the development of dance as well. So why didn't we see that here?
No, of course it did. You see, the Lucknow, the first Durud Gat was, as it was known as, now we call it Raza Khani Gat. So the first person to start Raza Khani Gat, or the fast composition, was from Lucknow. So he was from Ghulam Raza Khan of Lucknow. So and that's why it's also known as Purab Baj. Purab means from the Awadh, and the slow guts. In the earlier days, it was known as Dilli Baj. So the slow guts, the Vilambit guts, they were known as Dilli Baj, and the Durut guts were known as Purab Baj.
Okay.
And there were a lot of musicians from Lucknow. Like my ancestors were of course there, my grandfather Sakawat Khan Sahab, then my uncle, my father, they were all in Lucknow, so they contributed a lot in Lucknow. And Lucknow was a happening place in the earlier days, unlike now. Now of course later on the scene shifted to Calcutta and for some time to Delhi, but in the early days all the musicians, they used to come and perform in Lucknow. Even the people like Fayaz Khan Sahab, the Aftab Musiqi, and Ustad Alauddin Khan Sahab, they used to come down and perform for the radio. The radio recitals were from Lucknow radios. So they used to come there and perform there. And Lucknow was a big center, music center. That is why Bhatkarni ji, when he started the college, Marist College, he selected Lucknow in 1926. And the first person he appointed as instrumental professor for the instrument sitar and sarod was my grandfather, Sakawat Hussain Khan Sahab. And for sitar he appointed Hamid Hussain Khan Sahab. And also prior to that, Abdul Ghani Khan Sahab was also teaching there for some time when he used to come from Khajurgaon. And Yusuf Ali Khan Sahab, who was there when my grandfather went away for about 6 years to Europe on a Europe tour. So Yusuf Ali Khan Sahab was teaching there. So Lucknow has a big, large contribution as far as sarod and sitar is concerned. And for your information and for the viewers' information, the first sitar, the Kharaj Pancham sitar of Ravi Shankar, was made by Yusuf Ali Khan Sahab, who was from Lucknow. So, and his shop was in Lucknow. So people used to come to Lucknow to get their sitar jawaried and repaired. They used to come to Lucknow. Later on, the great instrument makers sprung up in Calcutta, like Kanaila, Hiran Roy, and others, like for Sarod Hemant Sen, and in the earlier days it was Gopal, and then his brother Durga. So all these people came later. But earlier, Lucknow was the center for all these things. And also for tabla, Lucknow Gharana started right from Wajid Ali Shah's time, and Abid Hussain Khalifa, then his son Wajid Khalifa, then his descendant Wajid Khalifa, then his son Afaq Khan Sahab, his son Ilmas, who is still there, and we have played together for a lot of time. Afaq Khan Sahab used to accompany my father and my uncle, and he was a regular. Then Munne Khan Sahab settled in Lucknow, and he used to play with Begum Akhtar. He was the main tablaist of Begum Akhtar. So it is not that Lucknow didn't contribute anything apart from dance. So Lucknow has a large contribution, big contribution to Indian classical music. Also for Khayal also, there was a Lucknow, the Khurshid Ali Khan Sahab was there. People have forgotten the name. Baba Nasir Khan Sahab was there. And if you read the old books, there was a great singer from there. His name was Sadiq Ali Khan Sahab. And he was a little eccentric. So in Urdu they used to call him Sadiq Ali Khan Side. Side means a little eccentric. There is an anecdote about him also. When he was going around and at that time the king was Razuddin Haider. So or Nasiruddin Haider, I forgot the name of the king at the moment. So his courtiers had told him, look, Your Highness, this Sadiq Ali Khan Sahab is a great singer and he can put people to sleep and things like that with his music. So the Nawab was very intrigued and he said, okay, I want to listen to him. So then people forget. Then one day Nawab went out for the king went out for a morning walk along with his courtiers and all that. And then the courtiers suddenly said, "Oh, Nawab, that is Sadiq Ali Khan." So he called him in and said, "Okay, you're Sadiq Ali Khan. Please come to. I want to listen to your music. So please come to my house, to my place." So Sadiq Ali Khan, as I said, he was eccentric. He said, "But I don't know where you live. He's telling the king, I don't know where you live. So how can I come?" So he was amazed. He said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll arrange for that." Then he said, "I have two conditions. That you have to give me 20 puris and 1 kg of, in those days it was not kg, it was seir, 1 seir of malai. Malai is cream. In Lucknow there is a typical layered malai, not like the cream which you get nowadays, it was something else. We still get it in Lucknow. So I want that, and if you promise to give me that, I will come. So nothing like that. So he was called. I said, "Yeah, okay, we'll pay. We'll do that." So he was next day. Next evening. He was there. Then suddenly he realized where he is. But then, being eccentric, he said, "You promise to give me 20 puris and 1 seir of balai. So please give it to me first. Have it sent to my wife. So then only I will start." So I said, "Okay, this is going." So he started, and the Nawab was very happy, and did his music. And then after it was all over, he said, "Do you have any wish?" So this eccentric fellow told him, "Yes, I have one wish. Please don't call me again." So the king said, "Why? Now you are happy, you are giving me so much of presents and that, and next time if you are not happy, you will have me killed. So if I am dead, you won't get another Sadiq Ali. But if you die, you will get a lot of Nawabs." Nawab, the king was so surprised by this answer. I said, "Oh, okay." He didn't tell him, because they were patrons. You see, nowadays if someone has said that to someone, they would have said, "Oh, you're asking me to die." You would have killed him immediately. So that was what Lucknow was like in the old days.
So what caused the movement from Lucknow to Kolkata?
When Wazir Ali Shah was deposed, he came with all his retinue, and including Basit Khan Sahab, my ancestor Niamtullah Khan Sahab, and other musicians also, a lot of them. And they travelled by a ship named HMS His Majesty McLeod, and they landed in Matia Bridge in Bichali Ghat, which is still there. Bichali Ghat is still there. If you go to Bichali Ghat, you can see a plaque there, which also commemorates and says, "Here Wazir Shah landed in 1856." And then he set up a mini Lucknow in Matia Bridge. So the Matia Bridge, the Garden Reach, it was not what it is like now. It was a very polished and sprawling place due to Wazir Ali Shah. Before it was not like that, but Wazir Ali Shah made it like on the lines of Lucknow. He had built 9 palaces, imambadas, mosques, and after he expired, since he had a lot of descendants, everyone claimed for a share. So the Britishers were very clever. So what they did, they demolished all the structures which he had, all the palaces and everything, except for the mosque and 1 or 2 houses and the imambara, the religious places. And they demolished all the palaces, sold the rubble, and then divided it among the descendants. So that way all traces was removed, plus everyone got his share. But main reason for demolishing it was to destroy the legacy of the Nawab. And now, of course, Matia Bhuj is not the same as it was. You can still visit the Imam Bada and see the Shahi Mosque, and there is Sultan Khana is there. And when he first landed, he had put up in a place which belonged to the Maharaja of Burdwan, which is now become the headquarters of BNR, Bengal Nagpur Railways. So that's why most of the musicians shifted to Lucknow. Because by then 1857 Delhi was also destroyed, so there was nothing there. So after Delhi, the only place where they could get some employment was Calcutta. Some of them went to Rampur, and some went to Jaipur and other ports in Rajasthan, because they had large musicians, court musicians. Some went to Baroda and other places. So they were the patrons. All these courts, these Rajas, Maharajas and Nawabs, they were the patrons in the old days. So naturally they shifted to these places.
So can you elaborate on the event when the Lucknow traditions and the Shahjahanpur traditions decided to merge together?
Yes, first Niamtullah Khan Sahib's sister married Shafayat Khan Sahib.
Okay.
And then Niamtullah Khan Sahib's son Asadullah Khan, he married my grandfather. The daughter of Asadullah Khan married my grandfather Sakhawat Khan. So through intermarriages, they were cousins in any case. So then they decided to, since there were exchanges of ideas, and a lot of music became merged, so they decided to call themselves Lucknow Shahjahanpur.
Okay. And with this merge, were there any more changes in the technique of playing?
No, the techniques, of course, it grew, because the technique of the compositions of Shahjahanpur were different, the compositions of Lucknow were different. So there were exchanges, and since Sakhawat Khan Sahib also learned from his father-in-law, Kaukab Khan Sahib, so he learned the compositions from there, and he learned from his father, Shafayat Khan, so he learned the Shahjahanpur compositions also. And he learned from his granduncle Fida Hussain, who was a very prolific composer. So most of his compositions are so difficult. I mean, it's very difficult to, even now, if I play and don't tell the tabla player where the sum is, he will not be able to figure it out where the sum is. So he was that good. So it developed, and the repertoire grew, and then my uncle became a disciple of Yusuf Ali Khan Sahib. So the Kalki tradition, that's also came into our gharana. So now I have the benefit of three streams, the Lucknow, Shahjahanpur and Kalki. And they are all Dhrupad based guts. We don't play dhuns, we don't play cheap stuff. So all our music is strictly Dhrupad based, especially the Alap portion.
Okay, so what was the event which brought the globalization in the Ghana?
In 1887, the Zamindars of Bengal, they sent my grandfather's grandfather, great-great-grandfather, whose name was Inayat Khan. And along with him, they sent one tabla player whose name was Ata Khan from Murshidabad. So they sent him to England at the the silver jubilee of Queen Victoria. And he performed there. So he was the first Indian musician to visit England. And there everyone was so intrigued by his fast playing, and they thought there is some machine inside the instrument, and a human being can't play so fast. So the poor fellow had to unscrew the top plate, the fingerboard, and show it to them that look, there is nothing inside, it's all hollow. So that was the first interaction with the Western society. And then in 1936, my grandfather went to Europe on a Europe tour. He performed at the Berlin Olympics, and he was awarded in fact, he got 2 gold medals, one for individual and one for the group. So because he was the music director of a group called Menaka Hindu Ballet. So he directed the music. Menaka was her stage name. Actually, her name was Laila Ray, and later on she became Laila Sukhe when she married Major Sukhe. So that was the second interaction with the Western world. And then a lot of students used to come to my uncle from abroad and to my father also. And as God will had it, I have been lucky. I have been to almost all the places. I've been to Japan, I've been to England, I've been to Europe, I've been to the States. So the family tradition is carrying on.
Okay. So when we see Indian musicians going abroad, like Ravi Shankar, we saw him collaborating with Viju Siddhar.
Yes.
So is it possible here for there any such collaborations?
It didn't catch on. The people, you see, Panditji was a very great composer. And when he interacted with the Western, he could compose something which is suitable for Western music also and Indian music also.
Yes.
And he collaborated with Yehudi Menuhin. So he taught him few composition, and the Yehudi Menuhin picked it up, and then so that is also happening now. Also, the people, I have also done it. I have played for the full orchestra when I was working in Afghanistan for an institute called Afghanistan National Institute of Music. And then we had an orchestra there. We toured the states, and I played sarod there. Of course, it was all solo pieces. It was like a concerto for me. And it was the 4 seasons. And then I played there. Yes, it has happened. I have played with a famous guitar player in Italy. So I have played with him also. But not on the same scale. There were others who had done it, they do it, but I prefer to do my own thing. I'm nothing against the collaboration.
Okay. But, so your father and your uncle took place of your gurus as well. So tell us, how did your journey begin? What are your earliest musical memories right now?
I started with my father, and he initiated me. Earlier I was not so keen because, and my mother wanted me to be a doctor, and as was the case in the old days, either you have to be a doctor or an engineer. But I was in my school and then in college, and my father also, when I was in school, he didn't insist too much. But later on, he said, no, it's high time, we start with the family tradition, start learning. So initially I started on his sarod, which was quite big for me. He was a tall man, so his sarod was also quite large. And then I had an excuse. He said, oh, this is too big, I can't handle it. And so my father, he was my father after all, and much more intelligent than I could ever be. He said, okay, if it is big for you. Next day he went to the sarod who was making sarod, and his name was Durga. He was Gopal's brother, and I still have that. So I still play that sarod. So he got a small sarod made, and then he said, okay. After 15 days, we got the sarod. He said, okay, now you don't have any skills. Start playing. And then I started playing, and later on I started enjoying it also. When I used to go with my father to the concerts and see the how he was welcomed by everyone, the accolades and clapping and people running to him for autographs and things like that. And I thought, it's a good life, so why not? So I started taking interest in it and I started learning it. But after some time, my father used to give me some work and say, okay, you practice this today, and then by evening I'll see how much you have practiced, how much you have progressed. And like all children, I'm like all mother, my mother was also indulgent, so I would say, can I go out and play and my friends play cricket or whatever. So she said, okay, you know. So, but my father could figure it out. He said, this fellow is not practicing enough. So he sent me to my uncle. He wrote a letter to my uncle and gave the letter to me. He said, give it to your uncle. And then the letter was written that I'm sending him. Don't be lenient with him. Don't be soft. Don't think he's my son. You just put him through his paces. Be very strict with him. So I carried the letter. My uncle read it and said, okay. So that day he didn't say anything. The next morning it started. He said, get up at 5 o'clock. And from 5 o'clock till 1 o'clock, he was teaching me and making me practice. In the morning, after some time, I saw that my aunt was late riser. So my uncle, before starting his practice, after offering his prayers, so he needed a cup of tea. So he was making it himself. My guru after all. So I said, okay, you don't make. So I used to make tea for him and for myself also. And then we used to have one or two biscuits or a toast or something. And then we used to practice till 8:39, and after that my aunt would make some breakfast, and then we would go inside and have breakfast, and then start again till lunchtime. So 1 o'clock we used to have lunch. That was the time we could stop. And after lunch, my uncle would rest for a few minutes, for an hour or so. Then he would go to the college, Bhatkande College, to teach there. So, and then that was from 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock was a free time for us. But he expected me to be practicing when he came. So before he could come, at 7:30, my cousin and myself, we would sit down and start playing. So when he came, he saw, okay, yeah, they're playing. So he wouldn't say anything. So 9 o'clock he would have our dinner and then go to sleep. So that's how, and I was with him for 7 years. It was very rigorous. And whatever I am today, I owe it to my father and to my uncle.
Awesome. But were you ever caught on cutting off the Riyaz time a little?
Yeah, oh yes. So, he found out that my aunt told him that sometimes when my cousin and we used to bunk and we used to watch a movie or something. Then he came up with a plan. He would send one tabla player from the college during the free time. So go and make them practice. So he would come in the afternoon, 3 o'clock. Sometimes he would come at 4 o'clock. So we didn't know when he will come, so we couldn't go out. We had to wait for him. So it was only after he finished playing, not so long, maybe for an hour or so, because he had classes also. So maybe for 45 minutes or 1 hour. Whenever he had a free period, he would come, and there were 2 or 3 of them in fact. So one day one fellow would come, the next day another fellow will come. So we are stuck. There's no way out. And he was different kind of. I mean, sometimes after 9 o'clock, I used to go to bed early. Even now, after 10 o'clock, I go to sleep. After 10, I'm not there. So sometimes, as soon as I've gone to bed, he would wake me up at 12 o'clock. Sometimes 11 o'clock. Sometimes early 3 o'clock in the morning. Go, get up and practice. Just after, no, you get used to it. You practice this rag which is meant for to be played now. So get used to it. Sometimes when you are in a concert, sometimes you'll be asked to get up in the middle of the night and play. So what will you do? So get used to it. So that also was initiated, and he forced me to learn that way also.
Okay. So do you still carry the schedule?
No, I've become lazy. But it's recently that I have, I'm not practicing so much for the last couple of years. But I have to practice every day sometimes, maybe for an hour or so, sometime in the morning, sometime in the evening. And most of the time when I'm teaching, so I don't teach vocally, just verbally. So I teach with an instrument in my hand. So that is also sort of practice.
Awesome. So tell us about your father a little. It is said that he was a great lover of vocal music.
Yes, he learned from, he was a Gandaban, Gandaman means the formal student of Rajab Ali Khan sir,
Okay.
Rajab Ali Khan of Devas, and also of Alladia Khan sir.
Okay.
And Alladia Khan sahab and Rajab Ali Khan sahab, they were both rivals. They wouldn't see eye to eye. And, but he became a disciple of both of them. He used to go, because they were friends of my grandfather, both of them. So when my father used to go to Alladia Khan sahab and then go to Rajab Ali Khan sahab, Rajab Ali Khan sahab would say, okay, you're coming from there. So he would pull his leg, and then when he would vice versa, when he go to Alladia Khan sahab, acha, wahan se aa rahe ho? So that means, acha, you're coming from there. So my father wouldn't say anything, just yes, yes. And anyway, then he learned. But he was also influenced by Fayaz Khan sahab.
Yes. And then your uncle is said to be a great practitioner, and he devoted himself completely to Riyaz. So how long did you do that?
I was with him for 7 years. So that time, my Riyaz time was the same as my uncle.
Okay.
And later on, then I went away to Kabul for 3 years. And there also, since I was alone, I carried on the same, but not in the morning because I had to go to office and teach. And so in the night, in the evening, and sometimes in the morning when during the off days. So I still carried on. Then I came back, and then I went to Assam. I worked in Assam Valley School for 7.5 years, and then to DPS Numaligarh for 7.5 years. So there the timings for my practice changed. It was mostly in the evening. Morning I had to go to school 7:30 in the morning, so there was hardly any time for it. But till then I was practicing, and then I went again to Kabul in 2010.
Okay.
And then it was again the same thing. And in class I had to, because I was with the students, so I was always playing with them. So it was sort of a practice and teaching both combined.
So in this stage of your life, what are the qualities you would say that you still carry of your father and uncle?
I wish I could have imbibed some more from both of them.
Okay.
But I try to follow whatever they have taught me. And I try to adhere to their teachings, to maintain the way they played, and not to digress from the path they have shown me. So that way I'm trying to uphold the tradition.
So you later on moved to Assam Valley School and Delhi Public School. These two schools are said that they are extremely westernized. So how was the approach of students towards Saroj?
There were some very good students. They were talented. But unfortunately, after they finished the school, not many of them carried on. Maybe one or two of them are still playing. I don't know, because I've lost touch with most of them, except for one or two who keep writing to me, sending me messages, wishing me on my birthday, anything like that.
Okay.
But some of them were very good, very good. If they had carried on, they would have done much better. But then, in school it was just a subject. They used to come for one period for 45 minutes and then go and then come next day. But in the residential school, I had this benefit of asking them to come for the extra time during the games time, during the hobbies time, and during the there are other things. So I had spoken to the headmaster and the principal, and they had allowed. They also saw the point, and so those who were not very good at sports and they were good at music, so they could come, they could skip the game and sports period, and they could come and practice. So that way, some of them did quite well.
Okay, and how different were they than the students you have recently taken up and chosen to teach?
It's a different. I mean, now they are all grown-ups.
Yeah.
They know what they want.
Totally.
Totally. So they, most of them are, some of them are already performing, and some of them are there. I mean, they're just beginners. So only time will tell whether they will carry on or whether they will stop. And so it's difficult. But there's most of them have potential. So if they carry on, it's a difficult path. You see, apart from being, apart from laboring hard, working hard, you have to devote time. And then you have to sometimes put up with the eccentricities of the guru also. Sometimes he gets angry, irritated. At my age, I get irritated very quickly sometimes. Sometimes, not always. That also when after I get irritated when after teaching people are not picking it up. I get irritated at myself when I'm trying to teach. Maybe I'm not a good teacher. That's what I think. So that's why I get irritated. Not because the student is at fault, but some people misunderstand it and then they get upset and things like that. But now I've realized that there's no point in getting angry, because that's the way I have learned. In the old days, they never used to praise you. Always, even when I was performing, my father never said, okay, you're playing good. No, my uncle. Behind my back, my uncle would praise me, I was playing good. But at my face, they would go, what Vishwa, Betala, and all those things they would say. And then people would ask him also, why do you do that? No, if I tell them that you are playing good, they will stop practicing. He will grow an ego, he will grow a big head and stop playing. He thinks he has learned enough, he has practiced enough, so he will stop practicing. Let him practice as long as he should keep on practicing. So that's why I can't expect students to do that. You see, in those days, there was times were different. One person was earning, 50 people were eating in the house. Now everyone has to earn also. So how can they give 10 hours of to music only? So when will they earn, when will they eat, and when? So one should not expect it now. If I did my uncle taught me one jhala for 6 months. He wouldn't teach me anything else till I got it. According to me, till I got it perfectly. But according to my uncle, even then it was not perfect. So he wouldn't teach anything else. He said, no, keep on practicing. But if I do that now for 6 months, the students will run away. They'll say, oh, he's only taking money for 6 months, he's not teaching anything. But they don't realize why I'm doing it. So I said, okay, I did it for 6 months. You at least you do it for 6 weeks, at least you do it. But no one is willing to do that. Every week they want something new. So how can you learn?
So would you like to say that there is a lack of patience among the students right now?
Not only I. The world has become impatient. So what can you do? I mean, all 5 million the students, I have become impatient. Everyone has become impatient. You go on the road, the drivers are impatient. They are honking unnecessarily. The car in front can't move because of the jam. But even then they keep on honking. So life has become like that. You can't help it.
So now, how do you believe the awareness about the Lucknow Shahjahanpur tradition stand? Are students willing to take up it?
Yes, of course. It is being, the interest is again growing. You see, everything has a phase. There was a phase even if you see the old popular music,
Yes.
film music,
Yes.
there was a time there was that music in Bollywood as Bombay music, film music. It was more melodious. People were there like Mohammad Rafi and Talat Mahmood and Manna Dey, and then suddenly a new crop came and the music also changed. It was more rhythm oriented, and the lyrics also had no meaning. Earlier it was the poets were writing good poetry. They were writing in Urdu, so the Urdu poetry was there, and Hindi poetry was also there, but it was more literary. Now there's no poetry as such. And music also, that's why you listen to the new songs. Today you listen, tomorrow you will forget it. But the old songs you listen, you still can hum the old songs. So that is also happened with the music. The new fangled stuff came in. So our kind of music went out of fashion for some time, but now it's coming back again. People want to listen to the old stuff, what it was like. The researchers are there. There are more researchers. They're going into research and finding out. There was this gharana also, and what kind of music they had. So it is reviving, and I'm trying to do as much as I can. And I think the students that I have taught, some of them who are were doing pretty well, and they will keep the flag flying after I'm gone. People like Matthias in Germany, Saktaki, Arnav, and then there are some students here also who are doing it. So some of them are good, and I'm quite hopeful also. So they will carry on the tradition. The rest is up to God.
So what according to you were the factors which caused the disinterest in Indian music?
Pardon?
What are the factors which caused the disinterest in the middle in Indian music?
No. There was not. There was never disinterest in it. People, the musicians are to blame. They didn't create the right. What should I say? They wanted to pander to the prevalent taste. So they didn't create a taste for it, the musicians. Whatever the audience wanted, they played. Someone said, okay, play something light, okay, they play some film song, they played that also. Play some dhoon, they played that also. They played bhatiyali, they played all that also. So then suddenly the people started wanting to listen to this stuff only. And also this mushrooming of colleges and schools, and people who were teaching there were not trained properly. They just passed out from some college and just became big gurus themselves without having a solid grounding. And then they were teaching all this kind of music, and this caused a slight disinterest. But the people who really liked it, they still carry on. And of course, the patronage also has a big role to play. The patronage in the earlier days, the patrons were patronizing this kind of music. So they were looking after the musicians, classical musicians. There were 1,200 musicians in Jaipur and Rampur Court, and they didn't have to worry about earning. They were getting their monthly salary from the court. The food was coming. The clothes were being provided. Everything was provided for. All they needed to do was to teach their students and the children. And once in a while, the Nawab or the king or Raja or Maharaja would say, okay, today I want to listen to him. So he was. So out of 1,200, not everyone was singing or playing every day. Once in a blue moon, his chance would come, and then he would sing in the court or play in the court. The rest of the time you were having a good time, you just were practicing. So where would you find techniques like that? Even in Bengal, all my ancestors, they taught all the babus of that time,
Yes.
like Haran Seed, my Kantullah Khan Sahab and Toka Khan Sahab, they taught Haran Seed. He was a big business zamindar. Then the first Bengali professional sarod player was Dhiren Bose. And he was a student of my maternal grandfather. The first Israj, professional Bengali Israj player was Kalipal. And he was my sister's student. So they taught, and then you've heard of the famous wrestler Bobar Buho. So he was a student of my ancestor. So they taught all this nobility. And in hindsight, I think that was a mistake. They should, along with this nobility, they should have also taught the common people. Then it could have flourished, which Baba Alauddin did to a lot. So that's why his name is still alive, because he taught so many people and he created so many good students. And that's why the tradition is carrying on. One reason why our Gharana has taken a back seat, because my ancestors didn't teach the common person. They taught only the nobility, the rich people, and they were good players, but when they died, their children didn't carry on. So ultimately, it all vanished.
So Taji, your style has often been described as instrumental, where you play the alap in the rabab and Shir Sangha style. How do you do this?
You see, because my ancestors were the disciples of Basat Khan Sahab, who was a rabab player. And from rabab, sarod also evolved, and Sursinghar also evolved. Sursinghar, the creator of Sursinghar, was, according to our family tradition, was Jafar Khan Sahab, a brother of Basat Khan Sahab. But according to some traditions, it was Pyar Khan Sahab. But according to Bin Kishore Roy Chaudhary and other musicologists, it was Jafar Khan Sahab. And from the other side, Shahjahanpur side, they were students of Beankars, so of Umrao Khan Sahab. So it was also Dhurpat tradition. And Surbahar also was created by Umrao Khan Sahab. It was invented by Umrao Khan Sahab. Later on, many people added something and developed it more, and the style changed and so on and so forth. But the actual inventor of Surbahar was Umrao Khan Sahab. So that's why now playing, since we have learned from the Rabab players, so we still follow the system which was followed by the Rababis. So that means we are in the Rabab, in the Alap, we follow, there is an Astai, there is an Antra, there is Sanchari, there is a Bhog, and then there are other things also. Then there is, during Jol, there is Lar Lapet, Lar Guthao, and so on and so forth. There are so many things which has come down from the Drupadiyas and the Rababiyas. So we still follow among the jhalas. We have so many different kind of jhalas, different kind of java work, mizrab work, thok jhala. Nowadays people talk about it, they know the names, but unfortunately not many people. There are thousands of good musicians and knowledgeable musicians there. Of course they know. India is such a vast country. I'm not the last word, but I'm sure a lot of people know it. But unfortunately they do announce, but they don't play it, and they don't differentiate, and they don't tell it to the students that, look, this is what is Lar, this is Prabhupada, this is Lalaki, this is Ulta Jhala, this is Sulat Jhala, this is Ulat Jhala, this is Thok Jhala. So that is where the difference lies.
Okay. audience reaction changed over the years for this?
Different
Mm-hmm.
places have different reactions. You know,
Mhm.
if you go to West, uh, they like it. If you,
Mhm.
they, in certain places they like Alap more.
Mhm.
There was a time when I first used to go to the Western countries, people used to tell me, "Don't do Alap, they won't listen to it. You just play something fast." No?
Mhm.
I said, "Nothing doing. My my forte is Alap. My main thing is Alap. So I'll do my Alap. Whether they like it or not, it's up to them. I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to pander to their like whims." So I play, and everyone liked it. You see, this is what I'm saying. You have to develop a taste in the audience. Unless and until you create an atmosphere for this kind of music, how can the people, if they don't hear it, they don't listen to it, if they don't know what it is, how will they know? It is our duty, the duty of the musicians to play the original thing, not hide things. People in the old days, they used to hide also. No, I won't play on the stage. People will steal my thing. They'll copy my thing. Arey, they'll copy, so what? They won't take away your hand. Your hand will be your hand. As long as they copy, they will be playing with their hand. I have copied so many things from my grandfather and my father. My grandfather expired when I was just 2 years old, but I listened to his records. I have seen his video film. I have tried to copy him, but no matter how much I try, I can never be like him. So his hand was his, my hand is mine. No one can be like me. He can be better, he can be worse, but he won't be me. So there is no need to. You see, all this hiding business is the reason why so many good things are lost.
Yes.
The thousands of compositions which are lost,
Yes.
be it in vocal music or instrumental music or any form of music. I won't teach it to the students, I will only teach to my son. If the student is better than your son, then teach to the student. What your son will do, he just won't do anything. So, unfortunately, I don't have a son and my daughters. I tried to teach them, but they didn't carry on. They said they're not their cup of tea. So for some reason or other, they gave up. But I have taught with an open heart to all students, whatever. And I'm in the process of writing a book along with one of my students, Dr. Max Katz. I've recorded more than 300 compositions, old rare compositions, and notated them. So the book will be out soon. As soon as Max finishes, he's doing giving it the final touches, and then at least those 300 compositions will be there for perpetuity. People can listen to it and learn from it and do whatever they want. I'll be dead and gone. So only my host can come and say, okay, why not acknowledging that you have picked it up from there?
Do you believe then the saying goes right that art cannot be forced upon anyone?
No, it can't be forced. Initially, you see, in the Gharana, like it happened in my case. It happened in my case. I was not so keen. So initially I was forced to it. But then it was just a matter of time that you start liking it. The music is such a thing that you're bound to like it and get interested in it.
Okay. So do you think that the hiding business kind of causes the audience gap and the artist gap in the halls when people are performing?
You see, that's why in the old days they were not allowing people to record anything.
Yes.
That was one of the reasons. But now what can you do? Everything is on YouTube.
Yes.
How much can you hide?
Yes.
So the one has to be realistic. You see, I will tell you a story. There was a vocal teacher in Rampur.
Okay.
He believed in his hiding business. So he was teaching his son in the basement. He didn't allow his other students or anyone else, not even the tabla player, to come, and he taught him everything. And since he was getting the remuneration from the court, and the Nawab knew that he's teaching his son. So after some time, the Nawab said, okay, you have been teaching your son for so long, so I want to listen to him. So he said, okay. So well, on a certain date, he was given to the court. And in the court, when he sat down, the tabla player came. And in the old days, they didn't have these bags, tabla bags, okay. They used to just wrap it up in a bed sheet or something and carry it. So they opened the sheet and took out the tablas. And this fellow had never seen a tabla before. He never played with the tabla, and he fainted out of fright. So the moral of the story is, don't hide. You didn't allow the tabla player to come and practice with them. And how will he sing in lay, in rhythm? If you don't teach him right from the beginning, naturally he's going to faint. He got such a fright, he fainted. So then Nawab understood everything. Then he better start teaching him tabla and so all these things happened in the past. And in the past, it was like most of the musicians were not educated. So educated in the sense that they were educated in their own way. I mean, they were knowledgeable people in their own field, but they didn't go to school. They didn't go to any missionary school or anything. They were not convent educated. Yeah, and so they didn't think so far ahead. So fortunately, in our family, all of us, right from the beginning, right from our time immemorial, education was a must. And everyone in the family has written a book. One or two has been published. Some are in manuscript form, which I'm trying to get published. I am also in the process of. I have also helped some scholars with a lot of material. And I'm in the process of writing sort of a. Someone is writing it for me. I'm narrating everything, sort of a biography. So it will be there. So education, I mean, it's a must. That's why all this hiding business, still teaching the students half the things, not all the other. If you're teaching the style and not teach the antara, one line change the little bit of here, this I'll teach to my son only. That has spoiled the whole thing. One reason why the old compositions are not available. Why are people looking for old things? If they were there, people knew it, no one would bother.
Yes. So how is it in the present scenario? Is this still going on, the hiding business and all?
No, I don't think so, but at least I'm not doing it. And none of my family and members and my ancestors never did it. You see, with my uncle, he never allowed any student to come in the morning when he was practicing or teaching me. Not because he didn't want to teach. He said if they come, they will be wasting with the beginners. So they will be wasting my time. So whenever some students used to come, so I want to learn from you, so take the admission in college. I will be teaching you there. You will come according to your class, or the first year, second year, third year, fourth year, and I will teach all the students in the same level. So I will be teaching the same thing. What I teach at home, I will teach the same thing. There won't be any difference. So why you want to come here and pay more? Here I will be charging 1,000 rupees. There you will be paying only 12 rupees. The fees was 12 rupees on those days. So that's what he used to say. Go and take admission in the college, and I will teach you the same thing. Don't worry. And he was doing that. Sometimes I used to go in the afternoon. He would take me in the afternoon. Come, let's go to college. So I was there sitting in the class listening to him, and sometimes they would say, take a start. When the beginners were there, learn this, that. He was teaching me the same thing. He was teaching them the same thing. So, hiding business was not there in our family.
So So as compared to the other Sarod Gharanas like the Gwalior Senior Gharana or the Senior Maniar Gharana, the Lucknow Sher Ranjit Gharana has taken up a backseat. Why is that?
There are various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Till my grandfather was alive,
Mm-hmm.
this was the foremost gharana, even in Bengal, even in India.
Yeah.
And if you go to YouTube and you type Sakawat Khan Sarod, you'll get a video. It was a, in those days there was no video, it was a 16 mm film. It was, the film was Wadia, yes, Rak Pilu, it was Wadia movie tools who had done it. So, and it also in the announcement it says one of the best Sarod players of India, Sakawat Khan Sahib would play Pilu film. So we if we were not so, if he was not so good, why would Bhatkande appoint him? Why not some other?
Yes.
So Bhatkande was not an idiot. He was a very learned man, and he Ratan Jankar ji, Pandit Ratan Jankar, he was the first principal, and Ratan Jankar ji was the disciple of Fayaz Khan Sahib. So all the cream of the musicians lot, they were appointed. Not only my grandfather, Rahmuddin Khan Sahib Dagar, he was there, Begum Akhtar was there, Abid Khalifa was there, Hamid Hussain Sitar, Yusuf Ali Khan Sahib was there. So all the great people were there. And then suddenly what happened, with time, in those days it was not a government college. It was a private thing. Then it became a government college. So my uncle, when he had joined, it was not a government college. Later on it became a government college. And then it was very difficult for him to get leave for concerts. So he had to apply, and they said, no, you don't have leave. You can only get leave during summer vacation and winter vacation. So suddenly he had to refuse a lot of concerts. And then suddenly, slowly the concert invitations dried up. And then my father shifted to Calcutta. He became the court musician of Nawab of Jalpaiguri. And here he was in his comfort zone. And sometimes when the invitations came, sometimes the Nawab would say, where would you go? Forget it. Because the Nawab and Begum, they both loved him very much. They didn't want him out of sight. So they wanted a lesson. They wanted to hear him every day and have a lesson every day. So how much are they paying you? How much you will get there? So I will get this much. Okay, don't worry, I'll pay you more than, so don't go. So that happened. And then also the tastes changed. My father, if you have some old recordings where on stage he's saying, please don't ask me to play all this cheap stuff. I won't play this dhun and bhayali or whatever. If you want to listen to some serious classical music, then so then by then the tastes had changed, and also then the invitations sort of dried up. Plus there was a lot of politics also involved. There was a certain group here which didn't want him to come up. So there was vested interest, and because of that, I had to suffer also. Since he was out of the picture, I had to and he died when I was very young, so I had to start from scratch. But that feeling of that politics was on. I shouldn't be saying it, but it's there, what can't be helped. It's part of the game.
Okay, so a couple of people have been a few questions. Okay, so what was your reason for giving up school teaching?
I gave up school teaching because my daughters had finished the school. And the elder one had already come down to Calcutta and joined St. Xavier's. And my younger daughter was in high school, and the schooling was over. I had joined the school for the prime reason for my daughters.
Okay.
And then I thought, okay, it's high time I go back to my concert days. And while I was there, I also got an invitation from Dr. Max Katz to visit the university of College of William and Mary in Williamsburg. And also I got an invitation to be the professor at Afghanistan National Institute of Music, which was started by the founder and the director was Dr. Sarmas. So I gave up the school. I'm so sorry that things have become what has. Afghanistan was such a nice place and nice people. I feel sorry for the people and all my students. Thankfully, some of them have been evacuated and they are now trying to set up a school in other cities outside Afghanistan. Hopefully, maybe in future someday I'll see my old students and Dr. Sarmas again. God knows, I don't know.
Okay. So I see another question. How distinct do you think is the approach towards music of your non-Indian students and Indian students?
There is no difference.
Okay.
There is no difference because it depends on the teacher. The approach has to be the same whether your student is a foreigner or an Indian. You can't differentiate because just he's a foreigner, I'll teach him something diluted stuff, and if he's Indian, I'll teach him very rigorous stuff. No, you've got to be consistent with both. It's up to the student whether they can pick it up. Some of the my foreign students are much better than the Indian ones. They're performing because they're full-time musicians. Some of my Indian students are also full-time, although they're staying abroad, but they're Indians. Like Arnab or Sataki, they're Indian, but they are performing.
Yes.
And they're good students, so I can't differentiate between him or Matthias or Marcos or Pete or whatever.
Okay. So the last question we take is, what is your composing process like? Your composing process like?
I don't compose much. In all my life, maybe I have composed 3 or 4 ducks. That too, when my uncle was there and my father was alive, and I had just done it for the fun of it, and so it happened that my uncle liked it and he also performed it in one of his All India Radio recital. No one would believe that. And he told them, look, this is not my composition, my nephew has done it. No one believed him. But I try to avoid composing. It's not that I can't compose, but I have so much to fall back upon. The 300, 400 compositions. First I've got to polish them up. Why compose something new when you have such beautiful stuff?
Yes.
I can never match the compositions, the composers of my ancestors. No matter how good I try, how hard I try, I can never be like them. Some people have a flair for it. Some musicians are better composers than performers. Some can do both. Some are better teachers than performers. But it all depends. I'm not into composing. But I do compose the extempore todas and things like that because I was taught that way. I used to be taught alap and guts, and then I was told to do your own todas and things like that. Initially, the patterns were taught to me, and then I had to do it my own. So nowadays I have to teach students. So when I'm teaching students, I have to compose according to their level.
Okay. So another person has asked, how is your approach while teaching compositions?
Pardon?
Your approach while teaching composition.
Oh, while teaching composition, it depends on. Sometimes I take an instrument with my hand, and the student has an instrument, so he has to follow how I am playing, and then I write it down. I notate it.
Yes.
So he can follow the notation, and then because you can't put everything on the notation, there are certain nuances which you have to show it to them, and he has to pick it up the way I am playing. You see, my music is Shruti based, Muchana based, Gram based. like in the old days. It's not just note based. Note based, you can take a book and say, okay, Yamana Mire Gama Pada, but how that Mire Ga has to be applied, that has to be shown.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Bihag also has Tivar Madam, sometimes, not always. Nowadays it is being used, earlier it was not there. But how is this to be used? How the Nikhat has to be used? What is the difference between the Komal Gandhar of Darbari and Komal Gandhar of Miyaki Mala? So I can notate it Komal Gandhar, but it won't be the same unless I show it to them and tell them how to do it. So while teaching composition also, you have to be careful and teach your students and teach them the pitfalls of what to do and what not to do.
Okay. And how do you think a student's approach should be towards the composition?
First he has to pick it up, the rudiments, and then polish it, then try to understand what the teacher is trying to say or what he is trying to teach.
Yes.
But first he has to pick up the composition in the basic form and then apply the graces.
Okay, so before we end this, Ustadji, what is your message for the younger generation of the music lovers or musicians?
They should listen to good music and try to listen to the old masters. If you want to learn, you got to learn, listen to the old masters. Please listen to the old masters. If you want, if you are a vocalist, listen to people like Fayaz Khan Sahab, Abdul Karim Khan Sahab. Those recordings are available. Don't listen to the younger generation because you may be thrilled by their speed, by their gimmicks, but you won't learn anything. So if you want to learn, listen to the old masters. Be it vocal, be it instrumental, be it anything. Even tabla or dance or whatever. The dance, of course, there are hardly any old videos available. So it's an audio-visual thing. But tabla, you've got lot to fall back on. You listen to Tarakwa Khan Sahab, listen to Afaq Khan Sahab, listen to other Karamat Khan Sahab, and so there's so many good tabla players of previous tabla players. Listen to them if you want to learn. If you want to just to enjoy music, you can listen to anyone.
Okay, perfect. Okay then, I guess we'll bring it to a wrap here. Thank you so much for doing this, and it feels so good to have a non-remote collaboration after 22 months, really. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you for hosting me. And let's hope in the future we'll have a second episode also.
Okay. Okay then. Thank you to everyone who watched and sent in their questions. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and you shall see me once again next week, so please stay tuned on my page.